are in a teaching series right now called I Wish, and the concept behind it is how often in your life, in my life, do we say the words, I wish I had not said that, or I wish I had not done that, or I wish I had said that, or done that, right? How often do you and I live with regret? We look back at our life or at the last week or at this morning, and we have some regret. We have things we wish we had done differently. And can we learn, is there biblical skills that we can learn that will take us from saying, I wish, to I will say these things, and I will not say these things. And so last week we talked about here's the verse. I almost forgot this. So the verse for the series, which we handed out last week, little cards have this verse on it so you can memorize it, is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. I memorized it differently. Submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. That's the verse for this whole month to be meditating upon, that we are taking our lives in all of our ways, we're submitting them to him, not just in some of them, but in all of our ways, we're bringing our life into alignment with Jesus. So last week we talked about those decisions that you make in the spur of the moment, in the heat of the moment, right? When it's an angry moment or a stressful moment or whatever it might be, those decisions you make in the heat of the moment and then you regret them. We talked about turning the dial back and learning to see it coming instead of reacting, we respond. We see those emotions coming or the pressure coming, and we make the decision. So we talked about some ways that we could do that. Targeting the impulse, deciding, here's the one I'm going to work on. So this month, I'm going to work on this one, whether it be anger or whether it be, that quick wit that you cut people with when it comes out of your mouth. Using our tools of, reading the Bible, praying about this specific thing, not just praying once, but praying daily. God, I want to see this change in my life. Repenting and seeking amends with other people if you hurt them, and then having a next play mentality, not coming under shame and guilt, but even when we stumble, we get right back up and we say, next time, next time, next time. So that is what we've been talking about. And this week, we're going to talk about a different kind of regret. It's actually kind of the opposite. So instead of that, you can make a huge mistake in 1 second. You can also make a huge mistake that is like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? So if you've ever asked yourself, how did I get here? How did I get here? I never thought I'd be a person who fill in the blank. And I think this is a human condition where we make little justifications, little compromises, little sacrifices of things that we wish were true about us, and it eats away, eats away, eats away. So an example from my life, not super deep or anything, because you don't want to know those stories. But I was, I think I've shared this before, but a couple months ago, I was realizing that every night I was spending time on Instagram, and it was just like an escape for me. And there's nothing wrong with social media, right, Chris? It's a neutral tool that can be used for good or evil. All right, finally. Are you happy? Okay. I often speak against social media, but at the same time, we put stuff on social media as a church, and Chris thinks that's hypocritical. So I just wanted to get it out there that it is both a good and an evil. But so too much social media is, I would argue, tends towards the evil side. But anyway, all right, so I was realizing I spent a lot of time, so I thought, let me check it out. And you do that. I don't know if you've ever done this, and maybe you don't want to, but you can go into your phone, and it can tell you how long you spend on your phone and on an app. And I was well over an hour a day on Instagram. And I'm 45 years old. And I just feel like that probably shouldn't be how I spend my life. I mean, how many hours a week is that? That's like 7 to 10 hours a week. That's like a part-time job. I am not getting paid for this. And am I getting any growth out of this? Am I learning? Anything you're learning on Instagram, probably not worth learning anyway, right? What am I really doing? And what had sucked me in was the reels. Anybody, I don't know if you've been sucked into the reels, but they're actually programmed to manipulate you and keep you looking at them. Like psychologists worked with Facebook and all those companies to help them figure out how to best addict you to this. And that whole thing, there's that pleasure response thing. And then you see one you like, and you're like, I will scroll through 150 to find another one I like, because I know it's coming, And I thought, okay, this isn't happening to me. This is my decision, but I never sat down and decided this. I never sat down and said, okay, I have decided one of the things I really want to accomplish in my life is a lot of Instagram. And I'm an intentional person. I want to spend time with my kids. I want to work hard at my job. And I want to look at Instagram. Like, these are the things I want, right? It's right under hanging out with my kids. I never made that decision, but in reality, that's who I had become. How did I get here? I got here by not having a plan and just slowly doing a little more and a little more and a little more. And then I got somewhere that I was embarrassed to be. I looked at that and I thought, that is not who I want to be. And so I had to make a change. So it could be anything in our lives. It could be something more serious, right? It could be like, I intend to be someone who comes home from work if you have kids, and I want to spend time with my kids. But you have found, like, you used to, like, be really intentional about that, but now when you come home, like, it started with, like, I need, like, 10, 15 minutes to myself. And I was like, I need a half hour, I need an hour. I'm really into this show. It helps if I check email when I get home. And it's just like, it's not like one big decision like last week. It's not like, well, you know what? I'm not spending time with my kids anymore. like no one does that. But it's like little step, little step, little step, little step. And all of a sudden you're like, how did I get here? I never spend time with my kids anymore. Or it could be like, I never intended to be someone who drank every single night when I got home. But like, I have become that. It used to be like once a week. It used to be a treat, and now, then it was like, oh, you know what, I deserve this, or like, I never used to be someone who drank too much. Like, I always knew my limits. But now lately, it's just been like, when it's really stressful, I can just tell. First, it was like once, and I was like, oh, I felt bad about that. And then I was like, maybe it wasn't that big a deal. I did it again, and now I do it every week, every Saturday or whatever. It could be looking at images, pornography on your phone or on your computer. It starts like, with one time, or maybe it's like not pornography, right? It's like you look at something that's mildly, here's a word you don't hear in church. Oh, there's kids in here. Okay. Filter, mildly suggestive, okay? You know what I mean, adults? All right? And so it's like, yeah, that's probably like, it's like one of those things where like, I didn't cross the line, but you like got right up to the line. That's what they call towing the line, right? Like I got right to it. And then like the next time you were like, you stepped on the line. And then the next time you were like, I wonder what's over the line, And now you're like, I'm down this rabbit hole. How did I get here? It could be with your money. It could be that you started spending a little bit above what you make. Just once. We just needed this one thing. It's okay. And then it was like, well, we did it once. We really need this thing now too. And now you've got credit card debt, You want me to keep going? It could be that person that you're texting that's not your spouse of the opposite sex. And you're like, you're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything wrong, like yet. But like that, it's like that, we're just friends. But like you get, if you were honest with yourself, some enjoyment out of that texting relationship that you shouldn't be getting. Like there's something in your heart that's shifting. I was talking to a counselor one time, and she told me that she hates texting because it has introduced so many more affairs. That texting is just like, maybe it just seems, it started as friendly, but like maybe it's flirtatious now, Or it could be personal care. Like I just, I know I should go to bed at a good time, but like, I just have been working so hard. I just need that hour of watching TV, and that hour becomes 2, becomes 3. And when Netflix shames you, right? And Netflix is like, are you still watching? And you're like, yes. Like, what do you mean? You want me watching this, right? Judgmental Netflix. Yes, I'm still watching, And you're watching it, and then when you're watching TV for that long, what do? You eat poorly, right? And then you're sleeping poorly. And then all of a sudden, you're this person who's like, maybe your body is in a position you don't want it to be in. Maybe you're filling your mind with stuff. Maybe you're like, I'm spending 3 hours a night watching TV. And if you're anything like me, as I went through those, you listen to each one. Okay, I'm not being mean to you. And you found the line of justification for yourself. You're like, oh, I'm not doing that. Right? You listen to the story of each one, and you're like, feeling a little convicted, and then as I pushed it further, you're like, well, at least I'm not doing that, I'm good. And so I just want to say, the point is, this is the slippery slope. That's what this teaching is about, is the slippery slope of justification, the slippery slope of compromise, where we self-justify. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Other people do worse. I've seen other people, right? Self-compromise. It'll just be this one time. And then it'll just be this one time. Self-deception. I don't have a problem. Or self-pity. This is the root of so much evil in my life. I deserve this because fill in the blank. My boss was mean. My wife doesn't understand me. My kids are annoying. My life is difficult. I don't have enough money. I work so hard. Nobody appreciates me. I deserve that extra drink, to look at that image, to stay up later, whatever. It's this slippery slope. And we think we can stop here, but the reason they call it slippery is because it's slippery. Have you ever been on something slippery? This week, so I have a strained, maybe pulled hamstring in my left, butt cheek, just being honest. And so, it's up high, I'm just telling you. And so I find myself walking around doing this, and then I'm like, that probably doesn't look good. But I was walking across, we have this old hardwood floor in our house, and I was walking to the fridge at night, watching a movie, just doing everything I just talked about, and I had new socks on. Have you ever put new socks on and walked on hardwood floor? It's like ice skating. And so I just stepped, and my left foot just went completely out, and I slipped down, and it was so painful. It's slippery. You think, I can step there. I can handle that. I can handle it. I can handle a little bit of sin, okay, God? And God's like, okay, try. Sin, at one verse in the Old Testament, says that sin is crouching at the door. It's waiting for you to take that step. And then it's going to be whoop, and then you're down for the count. The slippery slope of compromise. So, we want to look at a character in the Old Testament named Saul. Saul, if you're not familiar with the Bible, the Old Testament is the Hebrew scriptures that were written before Jesus, and that was part of the Jewish faith that Jesus kind of came to and revealed himself to. So we're linked. We're linked to the Old Testament with the New Testament, which is about Jesus and the New Testament church. And so in the Old Testament, Israel is led by God and led by prophets and judges, and then they ask for a king. And so the first king that God gives them is Saul. And he reigned for 42 years, okay? And had tons and tons of wars. He was mostly fighting all the time. But Saul was a man of really, really shaky character. I'm going to read you 3 quick snippets from his life. So this is from the very beginning. Oh, sorry, we'll come back to that. He says, Samuel was this prophet who God had said, okay, go pick Saul and make him king over the whole country and a whole nation. And Samuel had all of Israel come forward by tribes. The tribe of Benjamin was taken by Lot. So he already knew he was picking, but now they were doing it as a group of people. Who is God going to choose? So God chooses the tribe, clan by clan. It gets down to this guy. Matri's clan was taken. Finally, Saul, son of Kish, was taken. So he's confirming his selection. But when they looked for him, he was not to be found. So they inquired further of the Lord, has this man come yet? Is he here? Is he late? What's up? And the Lord said, yes, he's hidden himself among the supplies. So they ran and brought him out. And as he stood among the people, he was a head taller than all the others. Samuel said, do you see the man the Lord has chosen? There is no one like him among all the people. And the people shouted, long live the king. The thing is, Saul already knew. Just like the day before, he had been hanging out with Samuel, and Samuel had said, here's these 10 miraculous things that are going to happen to prove to you that God has chosen you. They all happened to him. And right away, Saul is a victim of his fear. And so this seems like a small thing. It could even be interpreted as humility, right? Oh, he was just humble. But this is the beginning of the slippery slope for Saul, okay? A little bit later, so Samuel told him, he said, look, go ahead of me and wait for me at this place called Gilgal. Wait for me for 7 days. Do not do anything until I get there. So Saul remained there, and the troops were with them. They were quaking with what? Fear. So here's Saul dealing with fear again. He waited the 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come, and Saul's men began to scatter. So Saul, this brand new kind of leader in Israel, he starts to be afraid of his reputation being tarnished. He starts to be afraid of, how am I going to go fight the Philistines if all my men are leaving? So the fear that drove him to hide and maybe looked like false humility now is starting to take over. So the slippery slope, he starts to do something that he never would have thought he would have done. So he says, bring the burnt offering and fellowship offerings. Saul offered up the burnt offering, which is illegal. Okay, the king can't do that. You have to have a prophet or priest do that, right? Just as he finished making the offering, of course, wouldn't you know it, Samuel shows up, right? Samuel says, what have you done? And so Saul goes right into what we all do. Blame shifting, self-justification. When I saw that see how many people he blames. The men were scattering, and you were late, and the Philistines are scary, right? Blame shifting. It's not my problem. I work so hard. I am so tired. People don't appreciate me. I deserve a little bit of a break. And I thought, the Philistines are going to come down against me, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So now he's like painting it righteously, right? So I felt compelled to do the burnt offering. Like, what a choice did I have? You have done a foolish thing, Samuel said. And then we see later, okay? So you see how it's becoming this slippery slope? Later, we find David is introduced because Saul disobeys a couple more times. I don't have time to go into the depths of Saul's disobedience. But eventually, Samuel takes the kingship away from him and says, he's still acting as king, but he's like, you'll be the last king. It doesn't get passed down. We're picking a new line. It ends with you. And David's the new guy. And David comes in. David beats Goliath. You're probably familiar with that story, even if you don't know the Bible. And part of that then brings David into Saul's household. And Saul starts this really intricate relationship where he likes David, but then he starts to hate David. And this is why. Saul was afraid of David. Again, fear. He was afraid of being king. He was afraid of his people leaving him. And now he's afraid of David ruining his reputation. Because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him command over 1,000 men. Seriously, trying to get David killed. But the only thing it did was make David more successful. And everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was, he became more afraid. But all of Israel loved him because he led them in their campaigns. So Saul starts out, just look at the story. In just a couple of chapters, Saul goes from first king of Israel. Everybody honors him. Long live the king. He's a head taller, right? Like he's this big shot. And at the end, if you read, he is being tormented by evil spirits. He's kind of going insane. He's hunting his son's best friend all over the country and the person he knows God has chosen, trying to kill him. He's lost it. He's disobeying the prophet Samuel. In fact, Samuel and him were close, and now he has no relationship at all. God has taken his favor off his life. And can you imagine Saul sitting there one day thinking, how did my life get here? How did I end up here? And if someone could have said, look, it was all, you're not a victim. Doesn't he sound like a victim when you hear that? And everybody left me, and right? You're not a victim. You just made these decisions, one decision after another, and it was this slippery slope that led you to here. It wasn't one big decision. It was all these decisions that led to now he just is unrecognizable from the beginning of the story. And what I want to say is we can avoid that. And I see it happen. It happens to Christians all the time. But we can avoid it. It takes some discipline, though. So whereas some of us might be impulsive, others of us are self-justifiers. And what we're talking about here is getting away from regret. Wouldn't you love to have fewer regrets in your life? And listen, as you listen to the rest of this teaching, some of you, all of us are somewhere on this. We might be making some small justifications, compromises. We might be in the middle where, if we're honest, we're like, I'm kind of slipping. And some of us might be like down here. And God has grace for all of that. So there's no condemnation today. There's no condemnation. But if you're down here, if you're saying, I don't recognize myself, I don't recognize my life, I don't know how I got here, Christian, and I feel trapped, and I feel stuck, and if I'm honest, I'm kind of angry. I'm kind of angry that you're talking about it. I'm kind of angry at other people because I don't feel like it's totally my fault. It's not fair that you're saying this is my fault. And you might be feeling all those emotions. And what I want to say is that God has a path for you to come out of that. All right? So I'm going to give 3 really practical pointers. But if you're really in that deep place right there, talk to me. Talk to one of our small group leaders. Talk to someone in leadership here that you know and trust. God is speaking to you today. He's opening a door of salvation for you. And he's a redeemer. And you can also say this on the other side, because I know people, myself included, who are on the other side of being there, who are saying, how did I get here? And it's a good thing. God rescued me. And God can do that in your life. So 3 things that I think we can learn from this story that will help us avoid the slippery slope. Number 1, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves. Number 1 is, it's so hard to do, to be honest with ourselves. So here's the thing that I do that's not good. I get emails that I don't want to respond to, and I leave them in my inbox. Or I get texts that I don't want to respond to, and I leave them unread on my phone. And days, sometimes weeks will go by. And that's not who I want to be. I actually, pride myself on being responsive. I feel like I've worked with people who are unresponsive over email and text, and it makes me feel like they don't care about what we're doing together. So I want to be someone who, when people, especially from church, but even from my other walks of life that I do, I want to be a quick responder, even if it's like, hey, I don't have time to answer this, but I see this email. Things like that. The reason I don't respond, if I'm honest with myself, is usually because I don't want to tell somebody no. I hate telling people no. And so if they're asking for something, and I know the answer is no, I'll just leave it there, and I'll tell myself, I'll think about it. I'll pray about it. Doesn't that sound like Saul? Well, I just felt compelled to ask God, It sounds so holy. Let me pray. I know the answer is no. Or I don't want to get into a confrontation. Those are the 2 things where it's like, well, I disagree with this, and I'm going to have to, I don't want to disagree. I love making people happy. I love keeping the peace. So what's that behavior? It's avoidance, right? I'm avoiding it, and that is me not being honest with myself. So part of my growth as a person, and part of how I need to, because the slippery slope to that is I can just destroy relationships, right? That can head straight down to I hear people say it about me sometimes, and it hurts. Not in a bad way. It hurts in a good way. I hear people say, yeah, he doesn't respond to texts all the time. And I'm like, oh. Because I know that it's true, but it's not who I want to be, right? I need to grow in that area. And so where do you need to grow? What do you need to be honest with yourself? If I'm honest with myself, I text that person because I'm escaping from the difficulties in my marriage, if I'm honest. And there's just no difficulty. I'm not having an affair, but there's just no weight. There's no responsibility. There's no history. There's just friendship. And I just need that with another person of the opposite sex, right? If you're honest with yourself, and that's not good. We shouldn't be doing that, right? If you're honest with yourself, I have an extra drink because honestly, I'm stressed out lately. And if I'm honest with myself, I'm not dealing with my stress in healthy ways. So I'm self-medicating, if I'm honest. Honest with ourselves isn't fun. I'm just going to come out and say it. This is not the fun part of the teaching. In fact, this whole teaching, not that much fun. Sorry, guys. But I think it's crucial. How many lives, how many marriages have you seen blown up by the slippery slope of compromise? Just think about it. Most people aren't like, hey, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go have an affair. Right? It's a long, slow process. People aren't like, you know what? I think today I'll become an alcoholic. It's a process. And those are all people who have pain. All of those pain begets pain, right? It's internal wounding that is unresolved is fertile ground for us to make bad choices that further hurt us. And that's the enemy's plan for our lives. But God has a plan of redemption for you and I. And it starts with the truth, right? There's a reason that Jesus says the truth will set you free. The truth isn't easy. It's not easy to think about. It's not easy to admit. But the truth will set you free when you can be honest with yourself. David prayed a similar prayer. He said, have mercy on me, God, according to your unfailing love. It's the relationship aspect. We're not going to be beat up about this. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash away all my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin, for I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. I am being honest with myself. So step 1, be honest with yourself. Saul was never honest with himself. Saul continually, till the day he died, blamed everyone else but himself. He never understood what he had done wrong. Even when, like, there's a one time when he kind of repents, but he kind of repents because he's caught, and so he has to say sorry, and he just doesn't want people to think badly of him, so he begs Samuel to act like everything's okay, right? But he is never really honest with himself. Number two, you got to protect yourself. Be honest with yourself. Number two is protect yourself. You have to build some boundaries. Now, we've talked about guardrails, the Andy Stanley series we did called Guardrails, where you build guardrails. Like if you're driving on the road and you see a guardrail, and there's a huge ditch down there, they don't put the guardrail down in the ditch, do they? They put the guardrail on the road. Like you could actually, if you removed the guardrail, you could safely drive where the guardrail is. It's somewhere safe so that if you run into it, something small happens instead of going off the cliff and something big happening. And so we need to do that in our lives. Like if you're struggling with an inappropriate or slightly inappropriate, or if you're honest with yourself, it might become inappropriate texting relationship, maybe you need a guardrail of I don't text people of the opposite sex. Could you handle that? I mean, I could. I don't, or Mandy and I, our phones are not our private property. So Mandy can look through my text messages anytime she wants to, and I can look through her text messages anytime she wants to. A lot of the times when I text a female, I make it a group of females, or a me, Mandy, and the person, just so it's like above board. And I don't do that religiously because for me, that's not an area that I'm like struggling in or anything. But if you are, you have to admit that, you know? I can tell you in my life that at night watching TV and being tempted to watch TV that's maybe not the best stuff for me, that's been an area of compromise historically in my life. And so I have guardrails around that in my life. I don't spend time watching TV alone. I just have learned I don't really trust myself. Have you ever noticed that? I just don't trust myself. It's okay to admit that. All right, you're an idiot in this area of your life, so I am done trying. There's just times in your life where you have to be like, yes, there I fail, and so I'm going to stop putting myself in that situation. Instead of like, well, one day I'll get it. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's not worth it, Right? Guardrails around like, well, maybe I need to go to bed at a certain time so I don't just accidentally waste my life away. Or for me with Instagram, I put a half-hour time limit on my phone, which still arguably is like, really? But, half hour, I put a parental control on myself. I need someone to parent me, okay? It's fine. You got to do what you got to do. You might need to password protect certain things because you can't trust yourself to not look at pornography past a certain time at night. You might need your devices to shut off. The thing is, how much do you want to be the person you want to be? Play it forward, all of these things where you have small compromises. Do you want to be the person that you will become if you keep pursuing those compromises? You don't become someone on accident, guys. We become who we choose to be. Our choices and our actions define who we become. They define our character. You get to pick who you want to be. So do you want to be a person who occasionally looks at pornography or someone who hasn't looked at pornography in over a decade? What do you want to do with your life? You can choose that. Do you want to be someone who occasionally drinks too much and people know that about you? Do you want to be someone who occasionally doesn't respond to texts and emails for a week and people know that about you? Or do you want to be you determine who you are by your choices and your actions? Now, I'm not saying they're all easy. You have to deal with all the stuff that gets you there. So there's counseling and there's therapy and there's prayer ministry and there's small group and community. But all those things can lead to, we're not victims. God comes to help us. So protect yourself, set boundaries. Proverbs tells us that the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple just keep going. We should tattoo that on our foreheads, right? The simple just keep going and suffer for it. Well, I don't know. This might work out. It might not. That's what the simple do. Number 3, surround yourself. Be honest with yourself. Protect yourself. Surround yourself. Be honest with yourself. Protect yourself. Surround yourself. How do I avoid the slippery slope? How do I avoid getting to that place where I say, how did I get here? How did I become this person? I never wanted to be this person. Be honest with yourself. Protect yourself. Surround yourself. I forgot to say, Saul didn't have any boundaries. He didn't have any guardrails. He just did whatever he wanted to do. He had unlimited power. Think about it. He had no checks and balances. And Saul was isolated. You read that story. He has no one speaking into his life. He's completely, except for Samuel, he has no community of people. David, at the same time, is creating these relationships with people that he's leading. Saul is just isolated. And you're not going to be able to avoid the slippery slope on your own. This is something, I've learned over my life that I need community. Who is able to speak into your life right now? Who's able to call you on your stuff? Who are you completely honest with? Do you have friends that know about what you're struggling with in your life or not? It's scary. It's vulnerable. I get it. And for whatever reason, I'm just going to put this out there as kind of a blanket statement that I know are not good, but guys tend to be worse at this. I don't know why. Just in general. I'm not saying all guys, but general. I'm actually amazing at it. But most guys, I've noticed, you guys are really struggle, Josh. Actually, Josh is the complete opposite of that. Josh, you need to rein it in a little. You tell too many people too many things about your life. Yeah. No, but I have some friendships where I can be honest. Do you have those? I need that in my life. I need that to be able to be, this is where I'm struggling. Even the stuff you're embarrassed to say. You need friends who won't judge you when you say that embarrassing stuff. It's a deception that you have to figure this out on your own. The hardest things that I've had to change about myself have only happened in community with people who love me. So, avoiding the slippery slope. Worship team, you guys can come up. Be honest with yourself. Protect yourself. Surround yourself. I just want to challenge you this week to think through, is there an area where you're slipping? Ask yourself that question this week, could you? Write it in your phone right now. Send yourself an email right now that you'll open up tomorrow that says, is there an area in my life where I'm slipping? Is there an area in my life where I'm slipping? And then maybe take a picture of this. What could I do to be honest? Why am I slipping? What's really going on? Be honest with yourself. What's really going on under the surface? How could I protect myself? What boundaries could I create? And how could I surround myself? Who could I invite into this process? Okay?